Okay, so welcome everybody to the first edition. Sorry about that. Welcome everybody to the first edition of the Chronic Read. Um, this is an idea that I had a few weeks ago because I was watching one of my guilty pleasures, The Real Housewives of New York City. I live in New York City, but I love a lot of the locations of the Real Housewives shows. But anyway, Karen Duffy was on. She's a really well-known author. She has an autoimmune disease, which is sarcoidosis. And when I was about 15 years old, my dad bought me her first book that she wrote, which is basically about how she was living with her chronic illness. And it was really helpful for me because she and I experienced very similar things since my diagnosis is really a mutation of sarcoid. I lived with that diagnosis until I was about 25 years old and until I was re-diagnosed with Blau syndrome, which is basically a genetic mutation of sarcoid. Blau syndrome is also known as early onset sarcoidosis. So she was someone who really resonated with me. And when I saw her on The Real Housewives, recently, I was like, oh my gosh, I know that name. I couldn't figure it out. And then when I looked her up, I realized that her book is on my bookshelf. And her new book, which is Backbone, which came out recently, is called Living with Chronic Pain Without Turning into One. So again, that really speaks to me and what I think my message and my mission are on my Instagram account. So I thought it would be a really awesome way for all of us to connect and share some of the thoughts that she puts in this book and have some really intellectual discussions about how we feel the book impacts us or doesn't, or really relates to our lives or doesn't. I think the point of this process is not to find all the ways in which we should just simply learn from her or whatever. Honestly, like, we could read the book and hate it, but I think it would be really awesome for us to sort of hash out, like, what our difference in opinions are or whatever, or how we feel like it resonated with us. So just out of a show of hands, how many people have read or started to read the book? I had said for this chat, since it's a really quick read, I didn't want to go too far into it because I wanted to be able to discuss a good amount of information and not skip over too much. But I had said that we would discuss up to page 43, which I think I mistakenly said 41, which is just about the same thing, which is basically the first, 4 sections of the book, I think it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 sections of the book. Okay, awesome. So, as promised, I actually took a lot of notes when I was reading it and devised a lot of discussion questions and things that I thought stood out to me. And so this will be a really guided conversation. It won't just be, hey guys, what do you think? And then silence. So, of course, feel free to interject with anything that you're feeling or thinking when we're bringing up these certain topics. Feel free to weigh in. Feel free to interject. Uh, Feel free to comment if you agree, disagree, whatever it is, or if you have anything else to add. So here we go. So, like I said jokingly when I was talking about the book in my posts, one of the first things that I noticed, which is on the front of the page, front of the cover, is a quote that George Clooney had written, and I love George Clooney. I think he's a babe. So I feel like lucky her, first of all, to know George Clooney, but second of all, not that she needs this endorsement because she is very smart and is chronically ill, so she knows what the hell she's talking about. But the quote says, "My friend Karen Duffy, who lives with with unimaginable pain, has taught me so much that my complaints are the most ridiculous in the world." And I wanted to know what everybody thought about that quote, not just that it's George Clooney saying it, but I'm curious to see what all of you thought about it, because for me, when I was reading it, I thought it was really interesting because I feel like how George Clooney feels after observing his friend in pain is ideally what we would hope from our friends and family when he says, my complaints are the most ridiculous in the world. Yeah, obviously, I think I definitely have been there as someone who does experience pain all the time. But I am also very self-aware of the fact that what I experience is not what everybody experiences. So I'm not naive about that, and I'm also not critical of other people because people only know what they know. But I wanted to know if that quote made any sense to you, or if you felt that you experienced something different in real life, because I do. I don't feel like people are as aware as George Clooney is in this quote. So what do you think? Did it speak to you? Did you feel like it's consistent with how other people view you, or do you feel like you have a harder time with other people truly understanding what it is that you guys are actually going through? You agree in saying that it's an idealistic view that you don't experience as often as you would like. That's sort of how I feel about it. um, it really, like I said, it really resonated with me because I was like, well, damn, what a really good friend. And right, people do only know what they know. I was like, that's really awesome. What a good friend. He's humbled by what he sees his friend experience every day. And I don't think that's as often the case. I don't think it's as uncommon as is presented on a lot of social media accounts. I don't think I think people sort of over exaggerate the way that they're treated sometimes. However, I know I've lost a lot of relationships, friends, family member relationships in my life because people don't understand. I don't, and I'm also someone that's kind of like F off. If you don't get it, you don't get it, and that's okay. But it doesn't change the fact that it sort of lends itself to an extremely independent and sometimes lonely existence, which is why I love my dog so much. Okay, let's see. A thousand rays of sunshine says, I agree. Most people don't seem to have that view. Alexandria says, people have no clue. What he said was sweet and really compassionate. Yeah, totally. That's exactly what I felt. I was like, oh man, do you want to be my friend? I mean, again, not just for the simple fact that it's George Clooney and he's easy on the eyes, but I was like, wow, and you know what? It just occurred to me as I'm saying this, George Clooney is someone who is, from what I know, I don't know a ton about him, but I watched him on an interview with David Letterman recently on that new Netflix special that David Letterman has. And he talks about his life and his family, and like his family are like a very, they're just very kind people. It seems like he had a really uh, well-rounded upbringing. It seems like he has a lot of support. He's super educated and down to earth and kind and compassionate and empathetic. So it seems natural for someone like him. I think that again, we don't always experience people like that who have the ability to take themselves out of certain situations and then imagine themselves in other people's shoes. Chronically Twisted says, only my parents and very close friends with chronic illness truly understand it. I feel in my experience. Yeah. I am trying to think if I had to say, I don't know if there's anybody that like 100% gets it. I think the person for me that gets it more than anybody is probably my brother. He and I have like a twin like mentality. He's 2 years younger than me, but we're very close and we think very similarly. And um, because we sort of get each other's back, I think he is able to, even if he doesn't understand it, I think he's able to be compassionate enough to try. Um, and my sick fit life says, not a lot of people have the capacity to put themselves in those shoes. Exactly. So you and I seems like we were on the same exact page when I just said that. So the second thing that resonated with me, the second quote was, let me see, it says here, here we go. The second quote right after that was, writing from the heart and the funny bone, Duff shares her raw and inspiring triumph over extreme pain and illness. Her bone deep understanding of how to transcend suffering is a must read. Thank you, Duff, for shedding light on the pathway to empowered living. So I wanted to know, what does the word empowered mean to you? because for me and my journey through being chronically ill, like I've mentioned to you guys, if you followed me for a while or if you're newer to my account, I'm 33. I've been sick since birth. And what I often feel is empowered, but because of the things that I've put in place in my life to be empowered, like being educated, working hard, and fighting through a lot of the nonsense that you often face when you are physically disabled. So I wanted to know how you would define feeling empowered, and if you feel empowered in your everyday life, or if you think that it's something that you could work more on to better advocate for yourselves. Um, Chronically Twisted from the last question says, I find others do say things to me regarding my health, but it's more in the sense of just saying something because I think honestly some people really truly don't know how to show concern or care. I feel like it's more of an oh poor you sense, and I don't want that. I want them to respect my journey and hopefully learn from it. I think that's really accurate. I mean, that's something that I can really relate to. I think that I mentioned it the other day in a post. I won't get too far into it because I want to make sure we stay on track. But I had mentioned in a post the other day that I think that there's sort of like what I coined as the give a shit scale, which is basically there are, what did I say, 5 types of people. There's the person who doesn't care at all and they're not interested, so they're not going to ask you anything about your disease. So that they're the person that's like all the way to like the left end of the spectrum. And then the next person is doesn't care at all or cares very little, but feels obligated to ask questions because they care more about the perception of what other people perceive of them. So they're going to be obligated to ask, and they're going to ask a very shallow, on the surface question just to make sure they checked it off their list and move on. And they probably won't even listen for the answer. They're just going to be distracted and looking at something else or change the subject or make it about them. That's the next person. Then you have the person after that who does care but has no idea how to express that care or concern, so they don't ask. So I feel like that person is a little bit less of a shithead than the last person because they actually do care, but just because they don't have the tools or the resources to be able to voice that concern, they still don't ask. So it's still kind of a shitty situation. And then, that person for me is kind of in the middle. And then you have the person after that who does actually care, but, sort of, again, like on a surfacey level and does have the tools or the ability to communicate in a way where they can ask how you're doing. But again, they're going to ask, it's not going to be so in depth or involved, but they do care. And, maybe because of their own world experience or their frame of reference, they are not maybe intellectually on the same level as somebody who could actually be empathetic or be compassionate towards somebody else or consider themselves in that person's shoes. Then you have the next person who really, really, really cares. Someone who might be a family member or a close friend or someone who has a long-lasting relationship with you, or is just like a decent fucking human being. And this is someone who is going to, if you work with them, they're going to offer to cover your shifts if you're sick. This is somebody who, if they're your neighbor in your apartment building, they're going to offer to walk your dog. Or if they see you struggling on the street carrying your groceries inside, they're going to help you. This is somebody that sincerely cares. And I would say that this is the last stop on the spectrum, but unfortunately it's not, because in my opinion, there's still someone else who can one-up or trump. Oh God, I can't believe I just said that word. I hate that word. I used to not hate that word, but now I especially hate that word. Somebody who can always one-up that person who really sincerely cares. And it's not that person's fault because they are doing everything within them to help you out or to be empathetic or whatever else. But the person that's going to one-up the person who just about hits the nail on the head is the person who has experienced something similar or terrible. So again, the only way that somebody for me can actually be more connectable to my situation or someone that I can really confide in or understands my pain in a way that unfortunately the last person does, and again through no fault of their own, because if somebody has never experienced a shitty thing in their life, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means that it's not possible for them to understand, in my opinion. You guys might disagree. But so what I'm going to say is that, this is somebody who might not have your exact disease. I'm not going to find people with my exact disease. It's a super rare situation, but I'm, anybody who's dealing with some kind of chronic illness, somebody who has watched a parent die of cancer, someone, someone who's been in a bad car accident, whatever, someone who has experienced something really traumatic happen to them. That is the person for me that's like ideal. That's because, again, and it's funny, when I was working at, well, I won't say where. I will actually. It doesn't matter. I don't work there anymore. I used to work at Sloan Kettering, and even in my practice as a hiring manager in the cancer center that I work now, it has always been important to me as a hiring manager for medical secretaries or administrative staff that work in an oncology setting that they get it. And I don't care. I think like when you're a secretary or you're administrative support, it's not really that big of a deal if you've never been a secretary or if you've never worked in healthcare before. If you can like walk upright and you were born in the last 40 years, you probably know how to turn on a computer. And, if you're not dumb as a box of rocks, I could teach you how to make an appointment. It's not that serious. But I had an interview with this guy years ago, one of the first people I ever hired, who in his interview, he was like really, he was nervous and he was anxious and he answered all the questions beautifully. But when I finally got to the question about, why do you want to work here? He started crying because his father was sick with cancer and was currently a patient at Sloan Kettering. So it really mattered to him. And he was really passionate about being a secretary, which is really hard to find. There's a big difference between finding somebody who is going to do a really great job and somebody who's going to make sure that they don't leave until the job is done because they can put themselves in that patient's shoes because maybe an hour ago they were in that patient's shoes sitting in with this family member in a different doctor's office or sitting in the waiting room for their own doctor's appointment, which is for me where I become my own best patient advocate. Let me see what some of your comments say here. Alexandria says, empowered to me means that I always have a cheerleader, whether that's a physical person, education, my doctors, it can be anything. Yeah, that's a really good point. And like I said, if people want to know, like, how can I advocate for myself, educate yourself. And I don't mean like people misinterpret what I say sometimes and they think that I'm saying like, if you don't have a degree, you're not valuable. That's not what I'm saying. Actually, just in the video that I posted earlier today about tips on how to be proactive and how to navigate through, what do we call it? The push and crash, which is basically like when you overdo it and you have to recover, how to prevent that from happening. I talked in there about how the best thing that you can do for yourself is to learn about yourself, is to get all the information possible. And people be like, well, okay, well, I Google my disease and I talk to doctors. No, what I'm saying is take a step back and really understand how your illness impacts you and what your goals are in your life and how you're going to get your goals accomplished. And with my favorite Becky phrase, which is in spite of and because of your illness. So it's really important that you know who you are so you can apply what your needs are to your everyday life. Because if you aren't working towards something and you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you're going to wake up and you're going to flail and you're not going to have any purpose. 1,000 Rays of Sunshine says, I agree. Some people don't seem to know what to say. Yeah. And it's unfortunate. I don't blame those people, but it just is. My Sick Fit Life says, yes, on the empowerment subject, it's a choice I made to all this experience to empower me instead of swallow me. That's amazing. That's exactly the right approach. And I think, having this discussion, I hope it resonates with all of you that it's really important to be aware of that because it is easy to get swallowed up in illness. Someone said it really articulately before and said to me that when they first got diagnosed with whatever it was recently, maybe a year or so ago, it was easy for them to sort of what they refer to as go down the rabbit hole, which to them meant they came online onto the chronic illness community and they were immediately swallowed up by all of this, like what I call, or my manager has said once, and I can't get rid of it because I think it's hilarious. It's bullshit bingo. It's a lot of kitschy buzzwords. It's a lot of people saying the same thing and not knowing what they're saying or why they're saying it. And then all of a sudden your mission every day is to post the sickest picture of yourself, or it's to make sure that you're sort of accepted into this community and make sure that people believe that you're sick. Who the fuck cares? It doesn't matter if people believe that you're sick. Does it change if you're sick? It doesn't change if you're sick. So again, like really empowering yourself and not relying on other people to completely carry you all the way through is super important if you want to be speak up when you needed to. uh, Kimberly says, love the give a shit scale. Yeah, so I actually, thank you, by the way. I plan to, like I said before, I coined that. I hope people don't start like misappropriating it, but I actually plan to draw like a cute little diagram of, what I'm envisioning it in my head. I don't know if you guys could see what I was trying to describe. I'm picturing a pain scale, and basically the reason that I came up with that is because I think we spend so much time shit talking all these people that don't know how to support us and whatever, and them and blaming them. I think it's really more about, for me, what has helped me again navigate through these shitty situations with other people who don't get it is understanding who I'm talking to, or as Judge Judy says, knowing who my characters are, knowing who my players are. And because there are those, I think I ended up with six different people in my give a shit scale. And I'm really intuitive and able to understand who my players are when I'm talking to them pretty quickly. I'm able to apply a level of understanding based on who it is I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to somebody who I know doesn't give a shit, I know they don't give a shit and I don't expect anything of them. If I know it's somebody that cares but doesn't really have the capacity to do anything more than that, I'm not going to hold them accountable really either. But if it is somebody that I think, a family member who's been around me, who's seen me sick, who knows firsthand from seeing it firsthand what I'm going through, if they bail on me in a moment that I think I need them, yeah, fuck you. Like, you should be around. Like, that's the person that I'm going to hold accountable. So when someone, a lot of people on here talk about, but you don't look sick stuff and whatever else, again, bullshit bingo, because it's a lot of, we're holding people accountable that aren't equipped to know any better. So again, like right now, I'm on social media. 5 seconds ago, I put on some lipstick or whatever. I don't feel so bad tonight. I'm excited about this. Me having a purpose and feeling excited about things definitely helps me stay distracted from being in pain all the time. I think that's great. But again, to someone's defense, if I go to work and I have makeup on and I'm engaged and I'm working hard or whatever, if someone perceives me as feeling okay, or if someone says, I'm glad to see you're doing better, they're not really wrong, right? Because if I wasn't doing that well, I wouldn't have makeup on. I'm not saying that makeup equals cured, but I am saying that there are days that I feel worse. Chronic illness is not a constant. That if there's anything that any of us should know for damn sure, is that there are no 2 days that are alike. And if it were as easy as anticipating 2 days alike, we wouldn't have half as much of a problem as we have every day, right? So for me, understanding that it is going to be an ebb and flow, and that other people witness that ebb and flow, when somebody says to you, I'm glad you're feeling better, even if that's not true, just say fucking thank you. Like, there's no reason, there's nothing productive or beneficial about having an attitude. Or if someone says to you, oh, but you don't look sick. First of all, that's never happened to me. Nobody's ever like said that to me in a condescending way. What I do get, which I think is a derivative of what everybody's saying, but people, like to bitch, unfortunately. So the better side of that doesn't ever come out on social media, is someone will say to me, I had no idea that you were suffering so much. I'm really sorry. Or you hide it so well. Or, I have a leadership role in management at the cancer center that I work at. I have operational oversight over several cancer sites in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island. I have a high-level position. I have to hide that I don't feel well all the time. Otherwise, I wouldn't be taken seriously. That's fine. So, I take that as a compliment. If someone says, I really didn't realize it, that really sucks. I think that's awesome. That's a win for me, because it means I'm doing a really good job at not letting people know that I'm struggling, because I don't want people to know that. That shows weakness, to a degree. A Thousand Rays of Sunshine says, empowered in the context of being sick, I feel like would be encouraged despite health versus the poor you mindset. Like I had a PT that emphasized I was a whole person and other diagnoses. And another PT said something beyond that recently. I'm trying to understand what that says. The whole person with other diagnoses and quality. So what you're saying is that sort of, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to understand it. Are you saying like, that like you're not just a sick person, you are a person. I try not to like push this mindset or dig my heels into it because I don't agree. I feel very defined by my illness. I know, oh my God, everybody's about to like pass out and lose their shit, right? But I do feel defined by my illness, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think illness has made me a markedly better human being. I think I know that I can be a terror on wheels. I can definitely be a bitch. I have a voice. I know how to use it, probably because of my illness than anything. But if I wasn't sick, I don't know if I'd appreciate anything in my life. So I do feel defined by my illness. But what I mean by that is it has shaped me, defined in the way that it has shaped me to be a better human being, a better person. Not defined in the sense that like, there's something wrong with me. And I think, again, like not to get too off track, but this is like, again, like one of the things that I really enjoy talking about, because I think a lot of the problem in the chronic illness community online, and I specify online because I don't experience this shit in real life. Before I ever hop on Instagram, any chronically ill person that I ever met was like a normal person, like me. When I go online, I see a lot of craziness that I don't understand. But either way, I think the problem is when people say, oh, I'm not defined by my illness. Let's like take a step back and understand why that's a problem. Like, because and I do know why it's a problem, because if you really think hard about it, people don't want to say that they're defined by their illness because people view illness as a weakness, or they view illness as less than, or damaged, or there's a lot of negative connotation that comes from it, but it doesn't have to. So just because you're sick doesn't mean you can't accomplish a whole ton of really good shit. So let's like redefine the stigma and say I am defined by my illness, and that's a fucking good thing. That's a sort of like not exactly the same, but kind of like, hit like a girl or whatever. Like people like sort of like to, people are turning that one around. So it's like, fight like a girl, whatever, that's a good thing. That's a powerful thing. Just because you're fighting like a girl doesn't mean you're a wuss. It means you're awesome, or whatever it is, right? Same thing. I want to redefine the stigma. I want people to be proud of being sick, not in the sense of like, ha ha ha, I'm better than you, but like, there's nothing wrong with being sick. It's not something we chose. And if we can pull any kind of silver lining or good from it, even as hard as it might be on really terrible, horrible, fucking shitty days, it doesn't matter, because there's always something good that can come from the situation. And as whatchamacallit, what's the word I'm looking for? As stereotypical as it sounds, or cliche, that's the right word, sorry. As cliche as it sounds, there are always worse things. And which is a lot of a reason why I do work in oncology. My career for the last 12 years has been with cancer patients, because it reminds me every day that like I need to be grateful for a whole lot of shit. So Chronically Twisted says, I feel the most empowered when I'm in control of my care plan and know that my doctors are all in agreement with the treatment plan and feel like I'm moving forward on a direction when I'm not at a standstill. I totally agree with that. I think like when people are scratching their heads and like things are sort of gray and ambiguous, for me anyway, it causes me a whole lot of anxiety. I don't really know what to do with that. I need definitives and answers, and I need a plan. And again, like back to the post that I put up earlier today, I talked about how being proactive and planning the crap out of everything happening in my future, it helps me a lot. I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg. If I was born a type A person that was naturally good at forward thinking and forecasting my life, or if being sick has inadvertently turned into like a psycho crazed maniac about stuff like that. I don't know. Either way, it's a good thing and it helps me. And I also think my anxiety helps me, because when I'm anxious or I'm worried about something, I'm more likely to care about preparing for stuff moving forward. Kimberly says, my sick fit life says, yes, advocate equals educate. That's how you advocate. Understand what you're up against so you can put in a plan of place to move forward. Exactly right. That's exactly how I feel. And again, not to try to deviate too far away from what we're talking about, but that's why when I see so many people posting some of the stuff that they're posting, and they're saying a lot of people, bullshit bingo, like to hide behind these phrases of like, oh, well, this is just for awareness. It's not awareness. Like, a lot of this isn't awareness, because like, it's funny. Where are we still in May? No, today's June 1st. For all of May, it was what, RA awareness month, and like 20 other awareness things, right? For me, the patients, or the people, I should say, that I relate to most in my life when it comes to illness are people with RA or Crohn's disease. People that are on Remicade infusions are very close to my comfort base. And then also, I mean, I guess as far as medication and that process is concerned, but really, like, people with RA are the closest to me, because I have arthritis in every joint in my body. So I think we take the same drugs. Blount syndrome has no drugs. Everything I take is off label. And so, and as far as like, I maybe lupus patients a little bit experience what I experience, or vice versa. My disease is sort of a conglomerate of a lot of different crummy things. But what my point is, that the last month was RA awareness month, and even I got sick of seeing shit about RA. And I mean, I know there's no Blount syndrome month, but I think like it gets to a point where we oversaturate people's feeds and, Instagram feeds, and we inundate people with information, and it gets to a point where people are like, enough, like enough. So I think the most natural and sincere and organic way to educate people, or to make people aware and to advocate for yourself, is to purely go through your life in a way that shows what your limitations are. And oh Jesus, my phone's on fire. Not actually on fire, but I just got it's really hot. It's plugged into my charger, and I just got this message that says unable to charge, phone is too hot. And I'm expecting it to like light on fire right now. Is to naturally go through your life and, again, organically show how you navigate through your life with this chronic illness without drawing like an excessive amount of attention to it, because that's not how we live. We're not like going through life naturally, like, if no, let's think about this. Actually, I'm going to write this down, because I think this would be an interesting post. If nobody would matter, would it? I mean, I think that's a pretty loaded question. I think there's a lot of different ways that you can go with that. And I think it's important for ourselves and to be self-aware about, what are we doing this for? I don't believe 100%. I know there are some of you on here that I've had recent conversations with about the why behind we do things like that. And they're totally fair and reasonable. I say things that, if neutral obviously was in the middle, I definitely are on the side of more extreme in the things that I say and the way that I take these conversations sometimes, just because I like to get people thinking. But also, I do think it's important. And I don't want to have to keep like explaining my life away, when I think you guys know me well enough to know that I'm not trying to like ruffle anybody's feathers. I think it's important to know that. But my point is that, if we take a step back and we really, really like piece out, why are we doing the things that we're doing on social media? Who is it that we're trying to get a reaction from? Are we trying to get a reaction? If all of that went away, while you were not feeling well, would you take a picture of yourself if nobody was looking at the picture? No, probably not, right? There's like almost no reason to do that. And like I said, I do believe that there is a reason to actually do it if there are people looking at the other side of the camera for very specific situations, which I won't get into right now. But otherwise, no, I think it's important to be aware of that. Okay, let's see. Alexandria says, I love diagrams. I do this other diagram that Alexandria really likes. I don't remember. I don't think I've ever put it up on my Instagram, even though I've done it a few times in my live chats. And basically, I created it about a year and a half ago, I want to say. Alexandra maybe can confirm, when those chronic illness bingo boards came out, which I think are like ridiculous and disgusting and completely inappropriate and offensive. And it's basically, I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but it's basically, this bingo board, and it's like chronic illness bingo. And some people even went as far as to like make it specific about disease types, like RA bingo or whatever the hell, right? And basically, each box is like a potential thing that you could have or have experienced, or that somebody has said to you, or whatever else, like joint pain, on prednisone, gets infusions, whatever. And like the point is like to have as many things X'd off on the board to create bingo lines. And for me, the whole mission behind that is complete and utter bullshit, because it's like, why would anybody want to have as many X's on the board as possible? Like, there's nothing, you don't win at the end of that. Like, woohoo, like I have a full board. Like, for what? Now what do you win? Like, you're going to be like a miserable human being because you have 100 things wrong with you. Like, again, like that to me seemed very attention seeking. So, and I get really irritated when I see people, I'm going to do it right now. When I see people put in their profiles, they list, 45 different diagnoses. And I actually saw somebody who put like a latex allergy in their profile. I was like, for what? Why do we need to know this? We absolutely don't. And that's a little weird on other levels. But I have one disease. This is what Alexandra was referencing. I have one disease. It's Blough's syndrome. And with that disease, it causes me to have arthritis in every joint in my body. I have iritis and uveitis, which is inflammation in different places in the eye. I have cataracts in both eyes. I have orthopedic deformities. I have GERD, acid reflux, because I've been taking prednisone my whole life. I get chronic kidney stones because of chronic cataracts too, or because of the prednisone. Kidney stones because of the prednisone. I have, what else? What else can I list? I get stomach aches. I have, I get colitis, ischemic colitis. When I get infections in the stomach area, like E. coli, I get ischemic colitis. Talk about mental health, depression, anxiety. I don't know what else you want to say. Insomnia, nausea. And my point is that I have one diagnosis. All of these things that branch off to my YouTube video too. All of these things that branch off from my diagnosis are as a result and because of my one diagnosis. But what I see a lot of the time on social media is that people go online, and when you say, what's your diagnosis or what's your issue or whatever, diagnoses are not the same thing as symptoms. So anyway, like, we have a lot of different things. Being chronically ill is like no walk in the park. It's not an easy piece of cake. But and that's why I created this, because I wanted to put it into perspective. So people were a little bit humbled and saying like, okay, like I have one disease, it takes up my whole life. People can have more than one diagnosis. People can have RA and lupus, or they can have, I don't know, like there's these fuzzier ones like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, which I don't want to talk about in this chat tonight because it doesn't make sense. It'll take us way too far off track. But anyway, that's my little diagram about that. So I would put up a diagram about my give a shit scale, because I think if we understand, getting back to the root of the conversation, if we understand our audience and who we're talking to, it'll make it easier for us not to react or not to be like passive aggressive or cranky in those situations, because we have to really understand what somebody's intentions are in those scenarios. I'm gonna try to just sorry, I'm skipping through a little bit because I want to ask some more questions, and this chat turns off after an hour. Actually, let me ask you guys, this chat turns off after an hour, and I would have to restart the chat to come back in. If that's the case, how, by a show of hands, how many people would be able to come back on the chat when Instagram kicks me off at 10 p.m. or after the hour is up? That's in another 16 minutes. I'm sending. Oops, sorry. Alexander says, being defined by my illness was super hard because I was diagnosed later in life. For me, I didn't want to be defined by it because it felt like I was such a crutch. People use way too much. Yeah, totally get that. I agree with you. It's defining. You take me to passions. There's a lot of comments in here. Just scrolling through real quick. Funny. I like what my Sick Fit Life says, that illness used to make me feel weak, but over the years I've grown to understand that I am so much stronger because I've been sick and I've been sick since birth. But my first diagnosis was juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which was not true. My mom's a nurse, so she really fought for me to get a real diagnosis, which was sarcoid at the time. And so my point is I've been sick since birth, and I didn't lose anything. I didn't have a loss of a non-chronically ill life. So I say this all the time, I give way more credit to people who did have a life to lose, because I can't even imagine what that transition would look like. I just realized there are people in my YouTube chat. Chronically Brooklyn is in there. Are you still there? If you are, say something. Okay. Chronically Coloring says Behçet's is treated the same as RA and Crohn's. Exactly. Oh my God, there's so many messages. Oh, I'm glad you guys are liking the conversation. Chronic illness bingo makes me so uncomfortable. Yes, I agree. What is even the point? There is no point. Just if you want a real answer. I did the bingo thing until I was like, what's the point of this? Good call. Holy technology. Then I could add a mental health diagnosis too, but leave those out. Oh my God, my phone is on fire. Okay, all of you would come back. This is awesome. Okay, so if it's okay with you, I think this discussion is going really well. You seem to all be engaging and have a lot to say. I do have real questions, more questions after this. I don't want to rush through it or whatever. I want really for this to be an organic book club and really be able to, for all of us to flesh out what we want to say. So I don't want you to feel rushed either or unheard, and I want you to feel valued in this conversation. So if it's okay with you guys, I'm not going to push and rush through the next 13 minutes. I'll do what I can not to deviate too much, so we can stay on track. But let's see what we can do. Can you talk about your thoughts? Okay, let's see. Rebellious Story says, can you talk about your thoughts on the difference between showing the raw reality of chronic health emergencies like crying at night because horrible pain versus attention seeking? I think that is attention seeking. I don't think there is a difference. Because the way that I would sort of emphasize that, I know Brooklyn, I know who you are. The way that I would sort of explain that or emphasize that is that I think we can use our words in those situations. I don't, like, for example, you guys have never seen me come on here and cry, or I don't really even talk about my illness that much on here because that's really not the mission of this account. I'm really accepting of my disease and very secure with it. I don't need that support from the chronically ill community, and I know that I'm unique in that way. I know that that's not, I'm not trashing that or bashing that in any way. I don't think that's negative at all. I think people are finding solace and comfort and support in a place that they might not feel it in their everyday lives. I think that's really great that they have an outlet and a place to go in those situations. But I think, and I do think, again, like people navigate through their illnesses differently than other people or whatever. I don't think it's a healthy way to express what's happening. Because my feeling is that when I see that more often than not, it feels like it is attention seeking. And I think it's probably more that people aren't feeling heard or supported at home. So I do think that there's sort of like a rhyme and reason to it, like a method to the madness. But it's not my cup of tea. I think that going through our day to day and living the best way that we could voice that we're struggling. Hey guys, hope everybody's having a good day, whatever. I've been going through a tough time. Last night I was, struggling a little bit or whatever, or, for some reason I can't stop crying and I'm so emotional, whatever, but, I'm trying whatever I can do. I think that to me is a more balanced way of expressing what's going on without it coming across as attention seeking. That's me. That's me and my method and how I cope and how I express what's going on. I know that's not for everybody. But so to answer your question, I don't think there is a difference. I tend to think that people going online and crying is, in a sense, attention seeking because I think the other thing is, again, back to like knowing your audience. People don't always ask for that. So like we're going online and we're crying, like people don't give a shit that you're crying a lot of the time. So like I would say like the people that invest their interest in you and trying to understand what's going on, then maybe you want to show them offline or in a one-to-one conversation. Hey, this is what I'm experiencing, because they're expressing the real interest. But my feeling is, and I've learned this the hard way in my life, is that people that don't understand, who don't want to understand, aren't going to understand because they don't want to. So you can do whatever you want. You can kick, you can scream, you can show your stoma, you can take pictures of yourself puking, which I think is ridiculous. You could pretend like you're taking pictures or videos of yourself passing out or whatever it is. It doesn't change the fact that this person probably already doesn't think much of you if they don't believe who you are. One of the things that I keep saying in the last few days with some of the posts that I have put up is one of two things is happening in these situations. If you are someone if there are people around you who are asking, constantly challenging whether you're sick or how sick you are, fuck them. But if you are someone who a lot of people are constantly questioning and challenging, maybe the problem is you. Maybe there's a reason people don't believe you. And again, that could be a twofold thing. It either could be that sincerely that you have a weird situation and a lot of people just don't understand it. But I tend to think it's more likely that maybe you're overselling something that isn't really there. Not 100% of the time. I don't mean to speak so extremely, but I think that unfortunately, from what I've seen on the chronic illness community and the way that people behave and how they express the things happening to them, that people are misreporting what the reality is of the illness that's existing in their lives. I think people are sick. I just don't think that they're always as sick as they claim to be. Alexandria says, I think the issue with that is if it's true health emergency, you won't be posting. Yeah, that's a whole different conversation. That's like a lot of what I've been posting about lately is people don't people are hiding behind these it's funny, people hide a lot behind these catchphrases of everybody experiences pain differently, we shouldn't be judging each other. These are things that are all true but not true in this context. So like, yeah, they're true in life, like that people do experience things differently, whatever. I'm not challenging that. But I'm saying that is not what happens. Is people throw these phrases out and these cliches out to distract you from what's really happening, which is that they totally upsold what they're experiencing. Because again, it's funny, people, not so many people challenge me, but sometimes people will leave like a shitty comment and say like, who the fuck are you? I'm somebody that's chronically ill. I'm not like some schmo off the street that's my interest is not to judge other people or to be an outsider looking in. I'm not an outsider looking in. If I've been sick for as many years as I've been sick, I've experienced a whole lot of things that other people are claiming to be experiencing. My disease is extremely involved with a lot of organ systems in my body, and bodily functions. So there are a lot of things that people are claiming that they experience that I have firsthand experienced, and I know what's happening is not consistent with what it looks like in real life. So that's where I come from with that argument. Okay, awesome. Let's see. Post a picture of hospital symptoms have been treated and I'm out of danger zone. Yeah. Well, this is the thing. People like to chronically coloring's point, she said, I'll post it when I'm not in the danger zone anymore. But the issue is that, like, that's fine. I agree with that. And I do that too sometimes. Not often, but it happens sometimes, right? I might post something, but like a picture of my feet and just being like, hey, I'm in the hospital or something, whatever the fuck. It doesn't matter. But how are people posting in the danger zone? Like, people can't be possibly posting when they're in the danger zone. Because when you're in a situation, if you have to call 911, you should be in a position where you can't take yourself to the hospital, or you need it's an emergency. So like, either people are abusing emergency services, which I'm sure is true, or they're not as sick as they claim they are. So they're taking these videos and pictures in moments when they couldn't possibly be experiencing what they're reporting. That's what I feel. Deb says, I feel like it may be a cry for help. Yeah, I think it's a cry for help. I think it can be, but I try not to engage in that either, because I think that's like a super slippery slope, and that's for a conversation for a different day. Okay, this is going in a crazy direction. Okay, the reason I ask is basic human need to be validated, and maybe newly disabled people want the attention to go. Yeah, I think that's true. I think until people figure out how to deal with their illness and how to navigate through that, they might do some like hairy things that I don't think are like as honorable. But again, like, I think people can have like a grace period where they figure that shit out. But the problem is that's not what's happening on social media. What's happening on social media is that kind of behavior is enabled and supported and advocated for and perpetuated, and that is becoming the norm. So people aren't encouraged. Like on my account, I'm like, listen, do you get it all out of your system, flail around, right? I came up with the phrase, do whatever you need to do to get through whatever it is you're going through, until that thing becomes a problem, until that thing becomes part of the problem. So use whatever, I don't know, drink, eat shitty foods, stay up all night, binge watch TV. I don't care what the fuck you do. If it helps you get through, don't answer your phone. Stop. I don't know how to emotionally handle this. This is a lot for me to handle. This is a lot for me to take in. I need to come to a terms of acceptance. I don't know quite how to do that yet, so I'm going to behave in a really fucked up way. Fine. But again, until that thing becomes the problem or part of the problem. So if you like, the way that I compared this is like, years ago I got divorced, and before I started my infusions, because I don't drink, I haven't had alcohol in 5 years because of my treatments, which a lot of people don't understand, which is funny. But I don't understand it half the time. But before I started my infusions, when I was getting divorced, it was difficult, and I was drinking a little bit more than you probably should be drinking. I wasn't like getting passed out, blackout drunk or anything like that, but I was having wine, a good amount of wine every single day. And it got to a point where I realized, like, okay, Becky, like, enough's enough. Get your shit together. Like, you don't need to be doing this anymore. And I was self-aware enough to know, like, okay, this is no longer getting me through what I needed to get me through. This is now becoming its own issue. And it wasn't like an issue as far as like I wasn't an alcoholic, but again, my point is you need to really be able to monitor things like that. And unfortunately, we are all sort of embracing the chaos. And when I say we, I don't mean me or maybe any of you, but the chaos is being embraced. the madness is being encouraged, and it's like, there's a lot of like, do you, and self-care Sunday, and it's like self-care, people say, like, this quote is out there, floats around, like, self-care isn't selfish. And it's funny because the tone of that phrase is like, fuck you, if I have to take care of myself because I'm sick, that doesn't make me a selfish person. No, like, that's not what self-care isn't selfish means to me. Self-care isn't selfish to me means it shouldn't fuck around with other people. So, like, it shouldn't be a fuck you kind of thing at all. You should be able to take care of yourself, but again, within reason, in a way that's not like, screwing with other people around you. This chat's about to turn off in 15 seconds, so I'm going to restart it. I'm trying to look really quickly at some of the messages. Oh my God, there's so many. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm coming back on. Come back on with me. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Thanks for coming back on. Mm-mm-mm. Hey. Okay, so everybody can hear me okay? All right, so the next thing that I wrote, let's see. The next part of the discussion, let's see, it was the last quote about chronic complainer. Okay. Let's see, backbone gives me strange. It's funny. Okay, so the last quote in the if you guys, I promise we'll get past like the pre-intro. Like, you're not going to spend the whole time talking about random quotes in the beginning of the book. This is the last quote from the pre section. But basically, the last quote says, "Backbone gives a new and strangely inspiring spin to Samuel Beckett's maxim: nothing is funnier than unhappiness." With grace and great humor, Duffy records her endurance of considerable and prolonged suffering, only to reveal, through her example, how that can be diminished and marginalized in a life invested with gratitude and determination. And the part that I really want to discuss is where the quote says, "This book should be given to all chronic complainers to cure them of their ailment." How badass is that, right? Like, if you have someone that, like, in your life that complains about all the stupid shit in the world that really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter. Wouldn't it be nice to just like wrap this shit up and be like, listen, bitch, this is what it's really like to suffer. I try, and like I said before, I try not to live my life in a way that's like, oh, if you only knew. I never wish this upon anybody else. But but I would say that it can get annoying, right? To hear other people be like whining about shit that, like, it's like, if you only had any idea what more serious or more uncomfortable problems were, then maybe you would be a little less of a pain in my ass. So I want to give the book away like I'm Oprah. You get a book and you get a book, exactly. Chronically Brooklyn. The book that we're reading for the book club is Karen Duffy's book, which is called Backbone, which is about chronic pain. Okay, so now we're going to move into the introduction section. And one of the things that really resonated with me in this section was when Karen Duffy says, the problem with sickness books is they often try too hard to inspire you sometimes. To inspire you, sorry. Sometimes they can read as more inspirational than believable. And I wanted to know what you guys all thought of that. The trouble with sickness books is they often try too hard to inspire you. Sometimes they can read as more inspirational than believable. A catastrophic illness can't always be equated to great spiritual awakening. So what do you guys think of that? As it relates, specifically as it relates to Instagram and social media and how people try to, there's a lot of accounts, right, on social media. I'll take mine out of the mix because I don't think mine is necessarily like this. I mean, I try to motivate people, but I'm not necessarily all about the like chase your dreams kind of stuff. I think that's like cheesy and boring. But my point is, on social media, there are so many garbagey quotes, and I say garbagey, they're not really garbagey, but it's just like it's a repost fest where people don't even read the entire quote half the time. They just see like a certain font or they see something in quotes and they're like, oh, this must be inspirational. And they repost it. And it's like, but there's no substance. Like, what does this even mean? How does this, relate to our lives? Does it relate to our lives? Like, what do you guys think about that? Rebellious Story says, that's so true. I barely read about books about sickness because I get tired of being all about how the person is an inspiration and so brave. Exactly. When it's only the super inspirational above and beyond thing, it makes it kind of discouraging. Says A Thousand Rays of Sunshine, referencing the books, etc., not your account. Kimberly says, yes, I kind of feel like you read one, you read them all, books and captions. You got to weed through the garbage to find some substance. That's exactly how I feel. And now you guys know my secret. That's how I feel about a lot of accounts on social media. They all seem to be like these cookie cutter, hey guys, just an update on my health, or hey guys, well, which isn't that offensive. It's a lot of like I said, these quotes that are just like these cookie cutter quotes that are reposted and there's like sparkly things on them and everybody's like patting each other on the back. Or when people say, one of the things that bothers me is when people say gentle hugs. Shut up with your gentle hugs. It's like, we're talking online on Instagram. Like, if you say, like, oh, sending a hug your way, I'm not going to be like, oh, like, you just hurt me because I'm physically in pain when people hug me. Like, why? What are we doing? Everything is just like this mushy gushy garbage fest. I don't know. Can you tell that I'm like a little bit rough around the edges? New York Becky. Stuff like that like really gets under my skin because I'm like, who are we? It's like such a facade, so much of what we see online. Karen Duffy writes a deeply authentic way. Yeah, she does, because you know why? She's just talking about her life. She gets it. And I mean, I don't want to come across as saying like she's beneath me. That's not what I'm trying to say. But she gets it the way that I think I get it, or the way that I hoped other people would get it, which is what I was saying before about how the best ways that we can advocate for ourselves, or the best ways that we can raise awareness or empower others, is by showing people what we're able to do. And I don't mean able like necessarily that being like a black and white thing, like, oh, I'm able to work, so I'm a better sick person than you. No. But whatever your life looks like, whatever you're able to accomplish, big or small, that should be enough for somebody to be like, wow, that's inspiring. Sometimes it's not what we say that inspires people, it's what we do. And sometimes less is more. Sometimes the less we say is more inspiring, because you shouldn't have to say like, look over here, this is inspiring. If something is inspiring, somebody will believe it's inspiring without you telling them that they should feel that it is. You start sending me bear hugs. You could send me high fives, send me football tackles. How about that? That'd be pretty fun, right? I live like that because it's just living with illness, so being sick, not stereotypical. Exactly. Okay, let's see what I got next. The next part is the first real, what I think is probably like a chapter, I would say. I'm skipping over like the pain rating scale and the Duffy Murray pain scale. They didn't really do anything for me. Sorry if they did anything for you. I didn't really think that they were that enlightening. And I am not I can be goofy, like silly, stupid in my life, like dancing around and doing funny things, like just being a goofball. But like I'm not like a silly, funny person. I'm like fart jokes and poop jokes, and it doesn't do anything for me. I'm like way more into like dry wit and humor. So those scales that she has in there didn't really do anything for me. Okay, so the next section, which I actually did a sneak peek on my page earlier tonight, was the Accidentesiast. That's the name of this chapter on page 1. And basically, I don't know, what did you guys look up the word? I looked it up immediately. The chapter eventually just defines basically what it is. But I looked it up immediately because I am a geek and I like to know what I'm reading, as I'm reading it, so I'm not completely in the dark. So what do you guys know of what an accidentesiast is? How would you guys define it? If you had to define it in your own words, or do you guys still not know what it means? How do your misery be a smile? Exactly. Never knew that word before, never heard that word before, but definitely something that speaks to me for sure. I learned at a very young age how to hide what I was feeling behind a smile. And it's not an insincere smile. I think I am naturally deep down a happy person, a grateful person. I'm humbled by my illness every day. I know to be grateful for the things that work out because I've had so many bad things happen to me because of my illness that I know that it could be worse than whatever moment I'm actually in. But it is deceiving, and it's definitely gotten me into trouble when I go to like doctor's appointments and things like that, because I misrepresent sometimes how I'm actually feeling, which is why it's really important for me to have a clinical team and doctors that really know who I am. And also when I go to the emergency room, I am very careful about how I report my story, how I explain what's happening to me. I probably overshare in the sense that I give them more background maybe than they think they need or whatever. I don't get that feedback. Everybody, when I go to the emergency room or something, everybody seems to connect with me when I explain whatever my story is. But I find it necessary because I want them to know that that it's for basically what I say. For me, I don't come to the emergency room often at all unless it's like a really bad situation. So what I always say is, if I have a very high tolerance for pain and I take pain medication, I have things at home that would help me, that like medical interventions that would help me cope with whatever's happening. And if I don't feel like they are doing their job, then that's why I would go to the emergency room. So the fact that I would be sitting in the emergency room is very telling in that situation. Chronically Twisted said, yes, I learned that word months back on Instagram, and it was one of the better things I've seen on a post. I agree. Rebellious Story says, I didn't read the book, so I'm behind, and I've never heard the word. A Thousand Rays of Sunshine says, which has gotten my pain questioned before, but I actually do with PTSD and depression stuff too, which is, so it's funny, this is the important thing though, is when you're chronically ill, you have to find your voice. You have to learn how to speak up in all sorts of situations. And I really do credit my ability to do that, or give credit to, because if I didn't, I think I'd probably like fall through the cracks, overlooked, if I didn't have a voice and I didn't know how to advocate for myself. So when people say like, oh, I'm questioned a lot or whatever, not that I'm not empathetic to that, because that really sucks, but you need to figure it out. You need to figure out, because you are even if it's not your fault, not you specifically, I'm saying the general you, I'll say we, even if it's not our fault, obviously, that we're sick, or it's not our fault that people don't understand what's happening to us the way that we understand it, I still feel that we have a very strong responsibility to make people understand. And I don't say make lightheartedly. We really need to assert ourselves. It should be expected of us to explain what's happening with our bodies, because how are other people going to know if we don't do a good enough job communicating whatever that is? I know a lot of people don't jump on the bandwagon with my thought on that. People don't like when I say things like that. People have accused me of blaming the victim. That's not where I'm going with this. But where I am going with this, short of blaming the victim, is, again, if everybody you meet questions that you're sick or doesn't understand that you're sick, the problem is you. You are the common denominator in that situation. I have a very rare disease. It's like, I looked it up recently. 1 in 2 million people have my diagnosis. It's not a lot of people, which again leads me to the point of saying that most clinicians, doctors, whatever, they don't know, they've never heard of it before. That doesn't mean that they don't believe that I'm sick, and it doesn't mean that I should allow them to not understand what I have. You better believe that when I walk into a doctor's office, or if I go to the hospital and I come in contact with a clinician who doesn't know what my disease is, which is reasonable because it's very rare, it's my responsibility to educate myself enough so I can communicate to the people around me that need to understand. I need to be able to communicate to them what's happening to me. And it's my responsibility to do that. It's not the neighbor's responsibility. It's not your boyfriend's responsibility. It's not medical school's responsibility. Should everybody know all the diseases? That would be ideal, but it's like, how impossible is that? Think about how many hundreds of thousands of diagnoses there are out there. I think that's completely unreasonable, especially if your disease is so rare that your doctor will meet you and maybe never meet any other patient with that. The lack of experience is reasonable for certain situations. So I really believe that it's our responsibility to make sure that we know what the hell is going on with our bodies and how to communicate that properly. I don't care if you have to practice in front of the mirror. I don't care if you have to practice on a friend or on a family member. Write down mock challenging questions so you know how to answer them. Whatever it is, you need to figure it the hell out. And I wholeheartedly mean that, because nobody's going, like I said earlier, nobody's going to understand better what you are going through than yourself. And nobody's going to be able to advocate for yourself as well as you, because you are the one going through it. So you need to figure it out, and you need to figure it out freaking fast. Rebellious Story says, do you have any tips or words of wisdom on communicating with a doctor about your illness without making it come across like you're trying to usurp their medical experience? What do you mean by that? Flesh that out a little bit more. What you're saying is like, well, yeah, let me not put words in your mouth. Give me some more information about what you mean about that. Okay, I think you did already. I feel like some doctors can take offense when you start telling them about your condition, even though they don't know jack shit, but it's like you have to advocate for yourself. Well, okay, so the first, I think probably one of the, Kimberly, I didn't realize you were still here. I thought you were leaving. One of the best tips that I can give to anybody in any situation when you're talking to a clinician. The thing is, I know it's hard for people to hear and it's hard for people to understand, but we are the vulnerable party every time, right? Like if we go to the hospital, if we go to the doctor's appointment, we are at the mercy of whichever clinician it is that we're dealing with. It doesn't matter if this person is smart or stupid or nice or a real dickhead. It doesn't matter if they have the power of the pen. If they're the people that are going to be able to write orders to order testing, if they're the people that are going to be able to check certain blood levels, if they're the people that are going to send us for genetic studies, schedule us for surgery, write us certain prescriptions, whatever it is, they are the ones that have the power to ultimately execute your treatment plan. It doesn't mean they have all the power in that interaction, because again, if you are well informed and you're educated and you know how to speak the hell up, you can be very effective in conversations with clinicians. But the first thing that you have to understand, that is, it sounds sort of backwards, but in order to have power in those situations, you have to recognize that you are the vulnerable party, which means, in plain words, you are the one with something to lose. They aren't. It doesn't matter to them. If you walk in and you have a negative experience and you leave and you go find a different doctor, I'm sure there's like 50 patients behind you that have appointments that some doctors like actually care about losing patients and helping patients. But ultimately, you still have the greater risk, because even if a doctor loses a patient from his or her practice, it doesn't change the fact that that's a monetary loss potentially, but you could potentially be affected health-wise, which is a much greater issue to have than someone just losing a few $100s for a doctor's visit, or a couple $1,000s for future visits, or whatever else it is, right? You have the greatest loss ahead of you if something doesn't work out properly in that dialogue. Knowing that is the basis for everything. It's the basis for when you go to a doctor's appointment and you're waiting too long in the waiting room. It hopefully will keep you in check, so you don't say like two terrible things to the secretary if you've been waiting for 3 hours. If you go into the exam room and the doctor doesn't know anything about you, you walking in there and acting like you are the more knowing party, even if you are in some places, will immediately turn everybody off in your path. And that's super important to know. It's super important to keep in mind. And it can be frustrating sometimes, but ultimately, I feel like laying that groundwork and letting people around you know that you are humbled and you are aware that you are not the clinician in the dialogue, or in the discussion or the conversation or the interaction, whatever, it still gives the people around you the ability to say, okay, this is someone who respects me, so I'm going to be more likely to help her or him. And the issue is, if we walk into a situation, a lot of people have this issue and they talk about it a lot on social media. They walk in with like guns blazing and like, fuck you, talk about like Oprah handing out shit. And you get the middle finger and you get the middle finger. If you walk in and you're passive aggressive and you're just like a nasty bitch, who's going to want to help you? Like, there's no reason for that. And also, even if you are in distress, that happens to me sometimes. If I'm in the hospital and I'm not being treated properly, like when I had E. coli for the second time a couple of years ago, I was an inpatient for like 10 days. And there was a lot of mistakes that were made. I was actually admitted to the hospital that I work at. So I think, in my opinion, as an employee, they knew I worked there. I think they should have even been more aware of how they treated me, but who knows? There were a lot of mistakes. They kept infiltrating my IVs. They kept like dragging their feet with pain medication. There was one night that they forgot to bring me dinner, and then when it was the first meal that I was having after I was allowed to start eating again after like 8 or 9 days. And when I said like, yo, like, what about me? You didn't bring me dinner. They were like, oh, our kitchen's closed, so you'll have to like order delivery from the diner. Like, they didn't give a fuck. And like, it was so like shit like that makes me crazy. However, I'm very self-aware in those moments. I know that I can be like a complete terrorist. I'm an animal in situations like that, because I'm like, who the fuck are you? I work in healthcare and I know how to treat a patient, and this ain't it. And so it becomes very personal to me, because I can also relate to the clinicians or the support staff in those situations, because I've been, on that side of the puzzle. And if I don't treat people the way that you're treating me, then I know it's possible that you don't have to. So what I usually do to navigate through uncomfortable situations, or through situations that are escalating or are going in a direction that I'm not happy about, I'm extremely honest and direct, and I will say, listen, I know that I'm going to probably come across as like a huge bitch in this moment, but I need you to understand that I'm in a lot of physical pain, and I'm stressed out, and I'm anxious, and I'm scared, and I don't know what else to do but to express the fact that I'm really disappointed in my care right now. Or in like a less intense situation, like when you're in a doctor's office, if you're in a situation where you have a rare disease, which again I can relate to because I have a very rare disease. If you're in the doctor's office and your doctor's like, huh, I've never really heard about that, take that opportunity to be like, well, hey, like I know a lot about it. Like, how can I help you navigate through this? Again, make sure that you frame your conversation in a way that lets the clinicians still know that there's a respect level there, that there's a hierarchy, and you are not the doctor. I just posted about this the other day. So there are people that like go on Instagram and they say sometimes you have to be your own doctor. False, 100 fucking percent false. You should never, ever, ever go into a clinical setting and claim that you are the doctor. And it's funny because I could say, again, speaking from like a hospital administrator perspective, when a patient comes into my practice and they start like waving their arms around and say like, I know more than you, that is like a surefire way for me to be like, get the hell out of here. Like, you have no respect for me. You have no respect for what our doctors are trying to do. You have no respect for my staff or for my coworkers or anything. Get the fuck out. Like, that's how I feel in those situations. So if it ruffles my feathers and I am chronically ill, think about how, and I'm considerate in those situations, think about how ruffled clinicians' feathers would get who don't have that firsthand experience of being the sick patient. So again, like being transparent, being humble, carefully navigating through that in a way that's like, hey, how can we do this together? Those are all ways that I would say have always been super successful for me. But also know that if you are in a situation where the doctor's like an arrogant cock, then just get rid of them. Like, that you have the power to say, screw you, I don't think this is working out for me. Then you're being too cocky. I don't like your attitude. You don't have to say any of that, of course. Like, there's no point in that. But you can leave and get a new doctor. Like, there's no reason to continue in a clinical practice with a clinician that you don't feel has your back. And that's really the bottom line. If you do everything in your power to communicate effectively and respectfully and responsibly, and you still feel like you're being met with like a know-it-all, even though you're like, oh, this doesn't really feel like it's going well. If you get a bad feeling, get the hell out. It's really as easy as that. I know it sounds crazy and rash and extreme, but there are doctors out there who give a shit. And if you're in the room with one who doesn't, there's no reason for you to continue with that doctor. Texas Service Dog says, hi, I'm brand new here to your channel. Hi, welcome. We're talking about this book, Karen Duffy's book called Backbone, which is about she's chronically ill. And we're doing a book club. And tonight is the first chat talking about the book club. So we're just going over some points in the book. But don't worry if you haven't read it. We're talking about very general topics. So feel free to weigh in, and welcome to the channel. Welcome back, Brooklyn. Okay, let's see. Rebellious Story says, I feel like some doctors can take offense when you start telling them about your condition, even though they don't know jack shit. Okay, I read that before. Sorry. Kimberly says, my sick fit life says, I was never assertive until I got sick. It was necessary. And yes, it was my responsibility. If you're waiting for your doctor to figure your shit out, you'll be forever waiting. That's exactly right. That's 100% right. I mean, I will say, I know that I have an advantage living in New York City. I know that I have access to great healthcare. And really, I will say there's no difference between a doctor in New York City than a doctor that's like in the middle of nowhere in Kansas. As far as like their actual ability or compassion level or whatever, I think the biggest difference, and I see it too as a practitioner in healthcare, an administrator in healthcare. The biggest difference is exposure. So like you could go to some random state in the middle of the United States and they might not ever see a patient who has EDS because the population in town bumfuck is 275. And what are the odds that somebody's going to walk in with a like sort of a rare condition? Probably unlikely. It doesn't mean that they're not capable of treating you. It just means that you might need to do more to help them navigate through that situation than, say, somebody in New York City. You know, in New York City, I was diagnosed with Blount syndrome by a doctor who had seen it before in a with a disease that 1 in 2 million people have. So because of the volume of people that come through New York City, I think I was ultimately lucky because I mean I was 25 when somebody finally met me that was like, wait a second, this seems like it's something that we don't think it is. And genetic testing or whatever went forward. But either way, it all sort of came together because my rheumatologist is a badass. I'm obsessed with her, and I had her for the last like 8 or 9 years. I've had many rheumatologists in my life, but she really advocates for me and she listens to me. And she's somebody that thankfully doesn't necessarily wait for me to be like, the world is caving in, I need help. Like she's able to she knows me well enough and she cares about me enough where if I'm in an interaction with her in an office visit and even if I'm smiling, if I'm like, oh, something doesn't feel right, she hears that because I don't complain. So she's very in tune with my personality and who I am. So I'm very lucky, but that's not just not often, but I mean, not common. It's like almost unusual to find that, I think. So it's sort of like the concept of like being a defensive driver, right? When you drive, the idea of being a defensive driver is to anticipate like what the other person is doing or thinking. Because if you could like sort of pay attention to your surroundings and like be a little cautious, like, oh, well, let me make sure that they don't run that stop sign or, they're getting a little close to that red light. Let me make sure that they actually stop. That's the idea of defensive driving. And it's a good analogy for going into clinical appointments because you want to sort of anticipate what the doctor's or the clinician's next move is so you can help them navigate through that in a way that works for you. A Thousand Rays of Sunshine says, like, without coming off as you're trying to be the doctor. Yes, exactly. Interesting. Like some of you are saying, like doctors take offense if they don't know. I don't really experience that. When I say like, oh, I have Blau syndrome, the response that I always get is a doctor. Sometimes a doctor will lie and be like, oh, I've heard of that, and you can tell that they've never heard of that. They just don't want to be an idiot in the room. Not that I think they would be. It's a very rare disease. But sometimes, most of the time though, I'll meet a doctor who's like, I really have no idea what that is. So, and they'll be like, what is it? I think because I've been sick for so long, it's pretty apparent by the way that I speak. Um, by the way that I speak, by the way that I articulate my thoughts, by the way that I'm able to communicate effectively, and I'm educated. Doctors latch onto that pretty quickly, and they trust what I'm saying. I I think that's again a really great asset that I have. I'm very fortunate to be educated, but I know that's not also the case across the board. Everybody doesn't have the same access to certain things that I have. I grew up in a home with an emergency room nurse for a mother who now is a nurse educator, so she teaches all over Long Island. I've been sick my whole life. My career is in healthcare. I have a master's degree. My degree is focused on patient advocacy. There's a lot in my corner that makes it easy for me to properly report what's happening in my life on a clinical level, which I think a lot of patients aren't able to do. But it takes a lot of practice, and I think everybody can get there. But again, knowing that you have to hold yourself accountable for those situations is really the first step in getting that accomplished. Rebellious Story says, I love doctors that admit they don't know because my care is always better when they're willing to learn. Yeah, totally agree with that. Rebellious Story says, okay, so how do you figure out if a doctor doesn't know anything before they hurt you? For example, when I got a new diagnosis, I don't know what's going on, get a new diagnosis, and may accidentally stay with a doctor that is not knowledgeable. So how do you know if a doctor is a safe doctor then, especially when you know you don't know everything? When you say you get a new diagnosis, what does that mean? Like every time you go to the doctor that you like, do you have like 50 diagnoses? I'm confused by that a little bit. But I think again, by everything comes back to the way that you're treated, in my opinion. Sort of the way that I was talking about, the way that I hire secretaries at the hospitals that I work for. Um, it's a little different because you can teach a secretary how to use a computer, but you might not necessarily be able to teach a doctor how to be a doctor. That's a very different scenario. But I base most of my important decisions off of my gut feeling about how my interaction is with the other party. So if I go to the doctor, for example, and the doctor says, I'm not really sure. I think you have this. We're gonna look into it. And then like a few visits later, they're like, okay, I definitely think you have this. The first thing you should do is like try to understand what their validating factors are. So if the doctor says, okay, I think you have this because the sky was a hazy shade of blue this morning, there's something not right about that. If they're able to say, you know what, the definitive ways to find out that you have diagnosis X are A, B, and C, and you came back positive for this blood test, the imaging showed this, and we did genetic testing and you have a mutated gene. I mean, it sounds like the doctor like did what he or she was supposed to do to get to point B. However, if you are in a situation where even if they did those things, you're still like, I'm not sure, get a second opinion. It's really as easy as that. So, like, if you listen to your gut, like, unfortunately, I don't think people use this as often as they should. Our gut exists for a reason. We all have brains, we all have like a sense of what's going on around us. If you have any kind of concern, large or small, about what's about to happen, even if you're confident, like you can go to a doctor and believe what they're saying, but you're anxious about what the treatment plan is. Like, let's say you go to a doctor and they're like, you have this crazy autoimmune disease. And you're like, okay, I totally believe you. And then they're like, and so I'm going to put you on chemo infusions every single day for the rest of your life. You might be like, oh, I don't like where this is going. And it might be necessary. It might be the right treatment, but there's no harm in saying, okay, no problem. Just give me some time to think about it. And you get your ass out of there and you go on Google and you find another doctor who can tell you the same thing and validate your concerns or your fears. And then ultimately you can go to whichever doctor makes you feel more comfortable. Or alternatively, you might go to a doctor who's like, I think you have this, but I think this is a different treatment plan, and you might be more comfortable with that. Or unfortunately, you might find a doctor who says, I don't think you have this at all. Um, Again, going with your gut and then also feeling empowered and feeling like you can advocate for yourself is the only way that you're going to be able to navigate through those situations. Again, it's not on the doctor to make sure that you feel comfortable. In an ideal world, it would be, but everybody's personalities are different. When I was a kid, I have a lot of orthopedic deformities as a result of my chronic illness, my autoimmune disease. And I had to have, I don't talk about this much, but I had to have bilateral hip reconstruction when I was in my mid teens. I had like foot reconstruction, Achilles tendons lengthened, a lot of like weird orthopedic surgeries when I was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, those years. And the hip surgeries happened when I was in my freshman and sophomore year of high school. And because the hip surgeries were so extensive, well, all the surgeries were so extensive, my mom and I, went for 3 different opinions for 3 orthopedic surgeons just to see like who we wanted to go with. And it's funny because like they all had their own reputations, and my mom knew of one of them because he worked at the hospital that she worked at, so she was like leaning towards that doctor in her mind. But the first guy I went to was like just like a real dick, and he was like, oh, God wasn't very good to you, and just said like terrible things. And so obviously I was not going to go with him. The second guy I went to though was like, I really connected with him. He was straight to the point. I just connected with him in a weird way. And he had this reputation of being abrasive and curt, and like he's an excellent surgeon, but like patients were often turned off by him. And then we went to the third person, the one that my mom was pushing for because his affiliation with the hospital that she worked at, and I didn't like him. I mean, I was lucky enough that my parents let me make the ultimate decision at a very young age, but it was surprising to a lot of people that I went with the surgeon that I did. But my mom said she had interacted with this guy many times in her career, and he was never a jerk, but he was always just very like dry and again, like a little bit standoffish and seemed to be like really in the zone with the surgery, came in, did his cases, went home, like wasn't like so interactive with the nursing staff and whatever. But she said with me, he was like a teddy bear. He treated me like I was, like a princess. And she said that she saw a side of him with me that she had never seen with any other patient, which again sort of promotes what I'm saying, which is that everybody has different personalities, who we connect with. You can't anticipate sometimes, the same way you don't know who you're going to date, the way that you end up with people that you don't realize you're going to end up with, things like that. It's all about your gut feeling and knowing when it's time to get a second opinion, or if you have any doubts at all, then you shouldn't move forward, especially if it's in a serious decision-making process. A Thousand Rays of Sunshine says, whoop, I never want to come off as the doctor, which is why I hate when I unintentionally come off in that way. Just be really apologetic and self-aware in those conversations. If you say, listen, I hope I'm not overstepping, or like over exaggerate that, even if your mind you're like, fuck this guy, I just need to like get through this conversation. Do whatever you need to do to make sure that they know that you know your place and you should be good as gold. Or questions get taken as criticism of their intelligence. I mean, I tend to think that like if a doctor is thinking that you're questioning their intelligence, you must be framing your questions in a really kind of condescending way. So, and I don't mean that to be like a direct insult. I'm just saying that just be really aware, because if you're like, well, I read online that it's this, so what do you say about that? Of course, the doctor's going to be like, who the hell are you? And honestly, it's funny. A lot has changed over the years with like different resources on the internet. When I first started working in healthcare 12 years ago, the internet was a very different place. And there was a lot less credible information available. So patients would come in and the doctor would have said like, okay, this is your diagnosis. And the patients would go home and go on WebMD because that was all there is. And, WebMD is like really famous for making things exactly what they are. And like you could go on there because, you can't stop sneezing and then all of a sudden you're going to die of a brain tumor. So like it really has a good mechanism for sort of making it seem like the worst is what's happening. So patients would come in and they would be like, oh, is my tumor, do I have a small cell or a large cell cancer? And the doctor would be like, the kind of disease that you have doesn't offer both. So like stop Googling around on WebMD and like listen to what the hell I'm saying. So again, like, I never recommend people go online and look up stuff like that to a certain degree either, because you could be really misinformed and then you can come back asking questions that don't make sense. And, it irritates clinicians because it's like, why are you even coming to me if you think you could know better on the internet anyway? I've come off as a doctor. Well, I'm scolded very rudely by the doctor. I felt so bad, but I was new to this illness. I didn't know how to communicate. And sometimes you just have to go on. Alexandria says, I got a new primary doc last year. I made an appointment with him just to talk about my illness and how it affects my entire life. We talked about my medical history and what my expectations from him were. That's awesome. That's exactly right. Like setting expectations in a respectful way, of course. Setting expectations and really having that having that opportunity to share that information with the doctor and really leveling with them like as human beings will make it easier for you to have a good relationship with them moving forward. A Thousand Rays Sunshine says, how do you help other specialists get it without coming off as telling them what to do? Listen, I feel like if you have to go that far to get a doctor to get it, then they're not the right doctor for you. I mean, I know that's like a really short answer, but it's my honest answer. I think you can meet a doctor that doesn't completely get it, but if they want to get it, they will. They'll ask you questions, they'll look up the disease, my doctor, my rheumatologist, she had never heard of the disease that I have. She referred me to an eye specialist who was the one that ultimately diagnosed me with my weird genetic disorder. And when I went back to her, she was like, weird, cool, I never heard of this. But she's like a super geek and into research, and she's a huge lupus expert. But she like did her homework. She connected with the doctor she had referred me to. She connected with her colleagues. And she's the reason that I'm as healthy as I am now, because she cared enough to get it. So if you have a doctor that doesn't get it and they want to get it, they will. And if they don't want to get it, move the fuck on. Easy enough. Alexandria says, I have close doctor friends and they love when patients come in knowing what's going on with their body. There's always an answer for what's on. It may be hard to find years and years, but there's always an answer, and doctors like when you've done your research and express yourself in an educated way. I agree with that. I think that's probably why I'm so biased in a lot of these conversations, because I am an educated patient. So it's not difficult for me to go into these interactions and feel confident. And then also the clinicians feel that confidence, but they don't see it as arrogance, because I am very careful about padding everything I say with, oh, but what do you recommend? Like, you got to give them a little bit to make them feel like they're super important in the interaction, because ultimately, like I said, they have the power of the pen. They are going to be the ones that ultimately order the treatments or the medications or the testing that you need to be well. And if you don't have that and you don't have their support and they're not on board, then it doesn't matter what the fuck you know unless you can write your own prescriptions, right? So, like, humble yourself. A Thousand Rays of Sunshine says, what would you suggest if someone is young but on their own for everything, like no family, spouse, friend, tango? I have managed my health independently since I was about 16 years old. So it's possible. I don't know. Sometimes I think it's easier. It's not easier. Like, I'm like, I guess maybe a little guarded when I say something like that. But again, like, just basically more of the same, more of what we've been saying, which is educate yourself, be confident in what you know, learn how to speak up. Like I said, whether that means practicing in front of the mirror or just making sure that you know everything you need to know when the hard questions are asked, and then be honest when you don't know. So, like, it's really a good balance of both being honest when you don't know and being able to speak the hell up when you do know. And everything else will fall into place after that. Making sure that, again, if you connect with a doctor, great. If you don't connect with a doctor, don't waste any of your fucking time. It's like, it sounds like, way easier than it should be, but it's not that difficult. Move the fuck on. There's always going to be another doctor out there who actually gives a shit about your care. Don't ever feel indebted to a doctor that isn't interested in helping you. So, let's see on here. Brooklyn says, I mean, as women, I feel we get mistreated by doctors because they're women. I don't you have to advocate for yourself. Doctors won't, and social work won't. I don't know what women has to do with it, because I don't feel that way about women versus men. Because I'm in New York City and many of the doctors that I work with are women. So for this section, for the excidentisius, why can't I say that word anymore? Excidentisius, there we go. On page 4, she talked about, from the moment I wake, before I even open my eyes, the pain detonates on the right side of my head, blah, 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 blah. She talks about, like, what her morning wake up process is like. And then it says, the toughest part of my day, which I really related to, was the toughest part of my day is waking up in the morning, arising with pain, swallowing, and then waiting for the medicine to kick in. It's like waking up with a hangover, but I didn't have the fun of getting hammered the night before. I thought that was really important. It's something that a lot of people don't understand. By the time people see me at work or in life, I am medicated. I have the things that I need. Taken a shower. I've done the therapies that I need to do to be able to function. And it's difficult as somebody that works full time. Mornings are really difficult for me. So it's not like I'm not like a lazy sack of garbage that can't get to work on time. Mornings are hard for me. I wondered if any of you felt that. Page 6. she said something really awesome as well, which really spoke to me. Just to let you guys know also, this chat's going to turn off in about 11 minutes. By a show of hands, let me know if you are interested in coming back or if you want me to wrap it up in the 11 minutes that we have left. She says, she talks about, every day I have a choice to be useful or useless. I choose to be useful or I try to, and this contributes to my happiness. I've had more than my share in the past 15 years. In a way, I think I am a very very lucky, unlucky person. What do you guys think about that? What do you think by what she says? I think I am a very lucky, unlucky person. Because that is exactly how I feel about my life. But I wondered if that resonated with any of you or how you feel it or what you think she meant. What do you think Karen Duffy means when she says, I think I am a very lucky, unlucky person? Rebellious Story said, maybe that at a glance, being disabled can come across as bad luck, but sometimes it can actually be good luck. Maybe. I mean, my phrase, one of the phrases that I've also coined is in spite of and because of, right? Like, why do we do things? I'm able to do X, Y, Z. A lot of people say, in spite of my illness, I'm able to go to school. In spite of my illness, I'm able to go to work. In spite of my illness, I'm able to run a marathon or whatever it is, right? Um, there's a lot of people saying that, but I also say in and because of my illness. And the reason that I say that is because there are a lot of things in my life that I don't think I would have done or been able to do as well if I wasn't a sick person. And one of the things is being a really solid, passionate patient advocate. Oh my God, I hope I can charge my phone. Let's see if it lets me. Unable to charge, temperature too high. That's really unfortunate. Um, since my phone is gonna die probably in a little bit, and the chat is gonna turn off on my phone. If you guys go, because the Instagram turns it off after 9 minutes or so. If you guys go to the link in my bio for my YouTube, Saraha and my YouTube and whatever else, you can go there, click on my YouTube, and I'll show you right now. For the whole time that we've been on this chat, I've been live. Hello! I've been live on YouTube recording this whole thing because I think this is a really awesome discussion. So if that's something you give me a show of hands, just so I don't feel like I'm wasting anybody's time. Let me know if that's something you're interested in doing. And then the benefit of that also, there's a chat and everything that happens on the right side of the screen, so I can still interact with you guys the same way. And Instagram won't keep kicking me off if you head over to the YouTube side. So let me know if that's something that you want to do. And we can continue the conversation there because I think that we're still really talking about a lot of really interesting things, and I wouldn't want to cut that short if you guys are still interested in continuing the conversation. Let's see. Rebellious Story says disability can empower you and force you to view the world differently, which can be lucky. Very interesting. You guys, such a good conversation. Yes, it is. That's okay. It doesn't matter what you're stronger than pots. Just to let you know, where my Instagram keeps shutting off after an hour, and we're like having really good discussions, and I don't want it to keep ending, and my phone's gonna die. It's a whole slew of issues. I'm live over on YouTube, like I was just saying to everybody else. There's a chat going on the right side for some people that are in that chat with me. So if you guys all go to the link in my profile for YouTube, feel free to come follow me on the live chat on YouTube, which has been going for the whole time we've been having this discussion, and we can continue it over there. I don't care if your username is different, just tell me who you are when you're over there so I know who I'm talking to. Okay, awesome. I think you really appreciate the things in your life that have been vital to your survival, like friends or family. So the way that I interpreted her quote, let's see, how much battery? Okay, I still have a little bit battery left in like 6 minutes. The way that I interpreted this quote, or what it meant to me when she says, I think I'm a very lucky, unlucky person. I think what she's saying, because she said, I try to keep the pain to fun ratio leaning in my favor, and this is how I go on, smiling through the pain, trying to find a bright side. Living with a degenerative disease is like living next door to a bull. You never know. This is actually what I should have read first. Sorry, guys. You never know when he's going to come over and ring your bell and knock you on your keister. So basically, I think what she's saying, and what I feel her point is, what I think her point is in that scenario is she's saying, since chronic illness is so unpredictable and you never really know like when it's going to flare up or when you're going to get your ass kicked or whatever, you could potentially be very unlucky as a sick person, meaning you could always be in the hospital, you could have you might not find a treatment plan that works, you could be in ICU, you could get an infection that could kill you, like all sorts of terrible things could happen, right? If you are chronically ill. And I think what she's saying is, all things considered, I've been lucky. And I feel the same way about my own life. I feel very grateful for the things that I have, and the things that have worked out for me. It's not always easy, but I think that, again, like I said before, it could always be worse to some degree. So I think that's how that comment sort of connected with me. I don't know if that makes sense to all of you guys. Okay, let's see who's in this chat over here. I don't even know how to tell. If you guys hopped in on this chat, let me know so I know who's here. Oh, hey, Sarah. Okay, Samantha Peeler. What is your Instagram name so I know who you are? Okay, cool. So everybody, if the timer's running out on Instagram, if you're, like I said, if you want to continue, everybody seems to be moving over to the YouTube chat, which is really awesome. I'm excited to continue in that way without getting interrupted constantly. So feel free to hop on there. Like I said, link is in my bio. Just click on YouTube, go on, you'll see that I'm on the live chat right now, and you can join my video. So I'm going to still continue to talk to both cameras. So if you leave this chat, feel free to come over to the other one. Oh, hey, everybody over here on the YouTube side. Awesome. Okay, great. I'm glad you're all joining on that side. That's really exciting. So let's see. The next thing that I wrote down, I hope you can too. I don't think it's difficult. A lot of people moved over really quickly, so I think you should be okay. Okay, so in the section, getting old for the third time, I wrote, let's see, on page 12. Oh, there was a word that she talked about, that Karen Duffy talked about in her book, called Mahji, Mahji. In Farsi, the word Mahji means looking beautiful after a disease, which I found encouraging. My illness became my metamorphosis. What do you guys think of that? I thought the word was pretty cool because I feel like in the English language, we're so used to words meaning exactly just what they mean, like duck. It's like it's a sort of a very flat definition for a lot of the words that we have in the English language. It's not usually like, where does it say? Well, like she had said, like in Albanian English dictionary, the Albanians have 27 words for eyebrows and 27 words for mustache, which means that like they basically flesh out a lot of things. So like this word means this kind of mustache and this word means this kind of mustache. So this like so it seems like they're really particular about their language, and I'm a super word geek. So when she talks about this Mashi word, looking beautiful after disease, and saying my illness became my metamorphosis. I mean, I thought that was really interesting. How do you guys feel about that? Like, what do you think that that could mean for you guys? Did you feel that, do you feel that your disease has turned you into a person that you otherwise wouldn't have been? Or do you feel like you've grown or evolved in a way that you can either blame or thank your illness for? Like what are some ways that you feel like your illness has become your metamorphosis? Like she goes on to say, it took 7 years of chemo drugs and long hospital visits to get my disease to a manageable and chronic condition. I learned to exist with sarcoidosis and created a whole new life. I'm still sick, but my doctor says I look a lot better in person than I do on paper. For me, I would say that, like I sort of said before, I feel like without being a chronically ill person, I would have been a huge asshole. Like I don't think I'd be half as grateful for the little things in life that I am. Um, it's funny, my grandmother, on my mom's side of the family, there are only 4 grandchildren, which is funny because on my dad's side of the family, there's like 25 of us actually. And I am the oldest of the 4 grandkids on my mom's side. And behind me is my brother, and then my 2 younger cousins after that, who are also brother and sister. So it's a small little grandchild unit. But my grandmother, she's kind of eccentric and nutty, and she's always said growing up, like that she's like, oh, you're so tough and you're so strong, and not many people would be able to handle what you go through. And she's even gone as far as to say, and your brother never would have survived. And I remember saying from like a little kid, maybe like my teenage years, like, grandma, like I would be a horrible human being if I wasn't chronically ill. Like when I wake up every day, there's no escaping it. So you wake up and you're constantly reminded that, there is something there that keeps you in check constantly. So I think without that, or without the fear of God in you every day that something could go wrong, like I think I'd live my life probably a little bit more carelessly. Yeah. Amy says, I have grown so much because of my illness. I am more empathetic, patient, and aware person than I was before getting sick. That's awesome. And I think the funny thing for me is since I've been sick since birth, I don't know what kind of person I would have been. So I can sit here and speculate all I want that I would have been like a real rotten human being. But I don't really know either way. But I think I know because I can be a rotten human being even when I am sick. And the reason that I think I am compassionate and empathetic and can put myself in other people's shoes is because of my own experiences. So I don't know if I wasn't sick if I would have been able to do that. My phone. It's never been this hot. I don't know what that means. Let's see if I can charge it now. Probably not. The temperature too high. Maybe if I turn it off. Let's see here. So let's see. The next thing that came up was there anything else? Yes, there is. Okay, cool. On page 12, special relationship with her husband. Oh, so on page 12, she talks about, oh, let me see what you said, Samantha. I've had significant life-ending health issues since I was a young teenager, so it's hard for me to think of what I would have been otherwise. Yeah, I totally get that. What I think is really interesting is like, I think of it more in like a medicinal way. Like I tell people all the time, like I've been on prednisone since I was 18 months old, and before you're 18 months old, nobody really knows what kind of personality you have necessarily because you're not really old enough to express that much at such a young age. So, and prednisone can be extremely personality altering. Like, especially if you're on a high dose of it, you could be more hyper, you could be more outgoing, more energized, like all these things, more emotional, all of these things that contribute because of a medication. Same thing with like pain medication, right? I have taken pain medication fairly regularly for the last like 8 or 9 years, something like that. I am self-aware about it, but I don't really know like how much it affects me and or how it affects my interactions with other people or whatever. I do to a degree, but like my point is I don't does anybody know who I really am because I've always been on medication from when I was a young kid with a slight break in between since earlier stuff was more neuro than EDS and comorbidities that got worse the past few years. I totally understand that. So changing directions a little bit. I thought it was really interesting. On page 12, she talks a lot about her husband, and she says he sounds like he's like an ideal partner to somebody who's chronic illness, chronically ill rather. She said, the years of acute illness weren't all bad. I eloped with my husband when I was still in the catastrophically ill stage. John had heard I was quite sick, and he bought me a dog bed so I had a comfortable place to lie on the bathroom floor when I was suffering the nauseating side effects of my drug protocol. What do you like? Some people have asked me recently to start posting more about like dating with chronic illness or whatever. What is what is this statement or what does this thought mean to any of you? Because I think it has been a struggle to find not just to find like decent human beings in general, chronically ill or not, to date. Um, I don't know if I expect to ever find somebody ever in my life who will be that considerate of what I need on a day to day basis. I was married at one point and he was a nice guy, but like he didn't really get it. So he wasn't so great about being proactive about things like that. But it just sounded like her husband is a really like it sounds like they're a really good team and he really knows how to support her in a way that lets her just be sick rather than like needing to ask all the time for help or whatever. It seems like he knows how to step in and when to step in and all that. Samantha says, I thought that was such a considerate thing to do. Like the gesture that took me by surprise, but it made it seem like there are people that may be like that. Yeah, I mean, it definitely like restores my hope in humanity and thinking that, maybe there are people out there who are considerate enough to take what I'm going through into consideration and like go out of their way to be that level of helpful. I still am skeptical, of course, but I did think it was really encouraging to read that, and I think she got really lucky. I mean, I don't think that's common. I don't know what all of your experiences have been with dating, but my experience, again, like I said, sick or not sick, is that it's hard enough to find a guy that just isn't a flaming imbecile and an asshole. So to find somebody that's so far in the other direction of the spectrum who's actually that compassionate and considerate of the illness piece of it would be ideal and would be really exciting to find, I think, if that ever happened. Let's see. Yep. Oh, I really liked what she said on page 14 where she says, our fear of old age also helps explain the fear of getting sick and of sickness in others. Illness foreshadows aging. Chronic illness ages you in presidential years. The inevitable decline of the body is sped up, and that frightens people who aren't sick. Mark Twain wrote, the fear of death follows the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time. And what she says is, I believe we are never too sick or too old to set another goal. Do you agree with that? Do you guys believe that that's true? Do you think that it's fair to say that our illness or an illness is the reason why we shouldn't set goals? Or do you think that there's a certain age or time in our life where, we should just sort of accept where we're at and call it a day? Or do you think that even with chronic illness, it's possible to, in my opinion, I think it's necessary to set goals. I don't know what you guys think about all that. But I think it's important. And the reason that I say that is because if I wake up every day and I don't have a purpose, like if I'm not really that busy at work, or I don't really have something that I can sink my teeth into that I'm working on at work, like a project, I feel almost hopeless. Like, okay, I'm going through the motions. I'm really bored. Like, I need something that I'm actively focused on, that I'm actively working towards, whether it's personally or professionally, which could be personally. I feel like I'm a wash. Like, I'm a very extreme personality. So if I'm not committed to like a big goal, then I end up turning into like a sloth. And I'll eat like junk, and I like won't do my makeup, and I just feel less inspired and motivated in those situations. Sarah says she agrees that it's necessary. Samantha says, I'm trying to reconsider the goal thing. I think it seems necessary just to be able to make it through each day with how hard things have been. It's something I've been working towards. So are you saying, and again, not trying to put words into anybody's mouth, is it fair to say that it's something that you struggle with, setting goals? Because you feel like, how can I, again, this is what I'm guessing. Are you feeling like, how can I possibly set a goal when all I'm trying to do is survive at this point? And by survive, I mean that loosely, like just manage this life that I'm living with a chronic illness. And it's kind of funny. I don't know if you read out loud what you wrote, but you said it's something that I'm working towards. So you're working towards being able to set goals, which means that in and of itself is a goal, right? I had a provider that basically made it this lost cause, give up sort of thing. So now I'm trying to reframe it beyond that and beyond surviving each day. So basically countering my own thoughts and messages from others. I think that's really important. And I also, what I will add to that, and maybe this will help you, maybe it won't, but a goal doesn't have to mean this like massive life changing event. A goal can mean just about anything. So it's funny because I put up this post earlier today about ways to avoid like burning out, or like, I guess in chronically ill terms, like people call it like push and crash, like where you are pushing, and then you overdo it and you get to a point of no return, and then all of a sudden you're done and you can't come back from it, and you can't bounce back from it, and you basically then spend like a few days recovering because you pushed yourself past what your body was actually able to handle. And what I said in that, it's one of the tips that I said was like, every day, make lists and write down a calendar reminders, whatever it is, alarms. And it doesn't matter how big or small these things are, write them down. So you have something to cross off, because it feels like an accomplishment is an accomplishment. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I painted my house today. It could be something as simple as like, I've been putting off mailing my rent. Put it on the list, because then it gives you something to cross off, and it gives you a feeling of accomplishment. And it's, in my opinion, it's those small victories that add up to the big victory of being able to accomplish your day. So like you can then at the end of the day look at your list and look at all this shit that you crossed off, and it doesn't matter if like it could be make lunch, put makeup on, brush hair, whatever. It could be whatever you want it to be. Put it on the list. Because again, I think like we have to give ourselves credit for just being able to get through the day. And each small little thing might seem super small, but ultimately, if we did it, we did it. And if we don't do it, we didn't do it. So, like, you know, I think for me, that helps me stay motivated because it helps remind me that I'm not just sort of going through the motions, that I am accomplishing things that are difficult for me to do, if that makes sense. Um, so I used to be an overachiever, like full private college, pre med, and now I'm mostly in bed, so it's kind of hard to adjust. Totally get that. Sarah says, chronic illness has adjusted and deepened my life goals. They're no longer superficial and time restricted, but the overall goal remains the same. For example, before I wanted to graduate university by a certain time because that was the socially appropriate time phrase. That's a super good point that I'd like to come back to. And to get a job. Now I still want to graduate university, but the time frame has been adjusted, and I'm also more grateful for my studies and don't try to rush the process. I love the quote, if the plan fails, change the plan, not the goal. That's really awesome. It's basically like what I was saying before, like with doctors or just like with your life in general. When you make X work for you, don't work for X. So same thing like with your goals. If your goal is causing you more stress and hassle, whatever, you should be excited. Goals are supposed to be exciting. Like if you sit down and you're like, my goal is to have a house one day, is to have a car, is to get a degree or whatever. The process should be fun and should be exciting because you are pushing yourself to work through something. It shouldn't be this daunting task, because if it is a daunting task, then maybe it's not really a goal that you want to accomplish, and that's okay. The other thing I wanted to say about what Sarah said is when I was in college, I was a student academic advisor. That was my job on campus, and as a result, I had office hours and I met with like 500 students in my building that I lived in. And I helped them plan their class schedules, and I helped them like plan out their course of study for like their path to graduation. I helped them navigate through difficult conversations and interactions with their teachers, like things like that. And as a result, the school paid for my room and board because I was an employee. And what I learned in that time was, well, firsthand, I saw so many people change their majors like halfway through or even three-quarters of the way through sometimes because they don't like what they're doing. How can you expect like a 17 or 18-year-old to know like what the hell he or she wants to do for the rest of their lives? I mean, even at 30 something years old, at 33 years old, I still don't know if this what I'm working in healthcare, if that's supposed to be what I should be doing for the rest of my life. I have no idea. So I would see people change majors constantly, and I learned at that time. I don't know if it's different now because I graduated from college 11 years ago. But at the time, the expectation, again, the socially accepted number for how long it took students to graduate was 4 years. But what I learned was the actual average was 4.5 years. So it's something that I always told people when they were in my office was, don't, even though, I know you want to graduate with your friends in your class and whatever else, like if it's the difference of you getting a degree that you like and that you think will be helpful versus getting a degree that won't be either of those things, stay the extra semester or the extra year and do what you will be able to utilize, because otherwise you will have spent all this time and money for nothing. Samantha says checking those things off actually helps. That's right. Goals are important. My big goal is BA. Amy says I'm not setting new goals, but should have done that before graduation. Change career path. Yeah, I think as long as we're working towards something, it doesn't really matter what that is. Because if you wake up every day and you don't have the desire to work towards anything, I think that's really concerning because it means that like you don't really care about anything, and I don't mean that in a negative way, like you should feel bad about yourself. I mean it in a way of like when we have a purpose, it's much easier for us to feel fulfilled, and it's much easier than for us, I think, to be committed to doing things that we need to do to take care of ourselves. Because also, if you don't have something to work for every day or work towards every day, and you don't feel like you have a purpose, then maybe I don't feel like I need to take a shower. Maybe I don't feel like I need to live in a clean apartment. Maybe I don't feel like I need to go to my doctor's appointments. All of that adds up after a while. So I actually had a few more points that I wanted to discuss, but I've been doing this for 2 hours and my throat hurts. And I am afraid that I will hurt myself if I keep going. So what I will do is I will revisit those last sections in the next live chat that I do for the book, which I plan to do it on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time moving forward. If there are times that work better for you guys, feel free to DM them. I'm happy to like change it up every week. And I mean, I might potentially have a second session sometime between now and next Friday anyway to catch some people that weren't able to make it for this one. But thank you guys so much for joining and for indulging and engaging, and your thoughts and your ideas have been really inspiring and encouraging, and I'm excited that this is something that hopefully you guys will feel useful and helpful. And that's it. You're always welcome to. I'm excited because like this was a really good chat tonight. And if you haven't gotten the book, this is the book. If you haven't gotten the book, I definitely encourage you to pick it up just because it's a really easy read and a lot of it really makes sense for us. But also, I don't know if you guys saw the post. If you haven't gotten the book, if you don't have Audible on Amazon.com, they give you a free book when you enroll, and Karen Duffy's book is available. And somebody told me today that they believe that she's the actual person reading it, which is extra cool. So if you don't have the money or you don't want to wait for the book to come in the mail or whatever, you can also get it by audiobook. If you have Audible on Amazon, or if you don't have Audible, you can get it for free. So yes, and she reads it. Okay, awesome. So thank you guys again, and maybe next time I will focus more on the YouTube side since it doesn't constantly interrupt us. But feel free to send me a DM, and I hope you guys have a good night. Thank you so much, and this is Bubba's paw. Bubba, you want to say goodbye? He's growling at me. Say bye, Bubba. Sorry. Let me see your teeth. He was sleeping. Now he's bad. Okay, have a good night, guys. I'll talk to you soon.